Well, good evening, everyone. I'm sylviaworsham. Welcome to Let's Get Raw and Real. And tonight we're going to get raw and real about a subject that plagues a lot of humans nowadays with the pandemic and has been plaguing us for a long time, grief and loss. And tonight I have a special guest. He's a friend and a colleague, Paul Gerber, and he's going to be talking about his journey through grief and loss. So welcome, Paul. And just for the first 10 to 15 minutes, I've asked Paul to go ahead and talk on his journey, because here's the thing, guys, as a turning points coach, when you go through major loss in your life, that's major transition. And this program was designed and developed to help people navigate turning points with more clarity and purpose, and to bring experts on board like Paul, who have lived through these experiences himself. So he's not just an expert through books, and I'm sure he's done a lot of research because that's just the type of guy he is, but he's also lived through the loss of his 2 infant daughters, and he has amazing advice to give us, especially for people that are currently undergoing a loss, who've just lost a child or a parent or a spouse. And I know a couple of you that are listening live here tonight are in this position, and you're wondering, like, how can I heal? Will I ever heal? Is this going to affect my marriage? What advice do I have? And what's happening with my faith too? Like, I'm losing my faith in God, and I know Paul is going to be going through these subject matters. So Paul, if you would, thank you so much for being here, for agreeing to be here. Paul Gerber is my friend and colleague. We are founding growth leaders at Growth U. It's a company based here in Austin, Texas, personal growth development. And that's how I met Paul. And he currently lives in Japan with his wife, Jaime, and 2 daughters, ages 8 and 4, I believe, right?
That's correct.
8 and 4. And so if you would be so kind as to walk us through your journey. And guys, let him go through his journey first. And when we start with the question and answer, if you feel like you need to ask a different question than the ones we're addressing, do so in the chat and I will address it directly to Paul. All right, you have the stage.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. And I'm glad that you said that I live in Japan, because people here bow a lot. So if the audience sees me bowing throughout the presentation, say, why does he keep doing that? So it's kind of like a twitch. It's hard to shut off. And thank you so much for giving me this platform. I love to share my story. So it's very valuable. So thank you. So I am from the United States. I'm from New Jersey. That's where I grew up. My wife and I met there, and we decided we wanted to change. So we wanted to go abroad somewhere. Mm-hmm. And Japan was one of our targets we were considering. And it didn't work out. So we said, let's stay national. And we wound up moving to Seattle. We chose Seattle and loved it, and just had a great time for a number of years. And eventually got pregnant with our first daughter. And it was a great time. It was super exciting. And the pregnancy went really well. There was a few hiccups along the way. In utero, they found our daughter had an extra digit, an extra finger, which they said could happen. And it's very simple treatment to get rid of it. You tie a string around it and it falls off. But they said, just in case, to be sure, we're going to have a lot of people on hand when your daughter's born. And to be safe, we did testing to see if there was any known genetic diseases so we could be prepared. And it all came back clean, which was great. As a parent, it's a big relief. And Eliana was her name. And when she was born, it's that moment when a baby's born that you wait for the baby to cry. It's the first sign of vitality. And it took seconds, and then seconds became probably 10 seconds, 20 seconds. And I knew there was a problem. And the doctors took Eliana. They wouldn't hand her to me. They took her and they said, we need to go right now and go work on her. And Eliana was born very sick, and we didn't know what it was. And we would get lots of diagnoses. We stayed in the hospital after she was born, and they said, we found out what it is. It's X. And it was a big shock to us. And my wife and I would do research to find out about that disease. And then the very following day, sometimes they'd say, sorry, it's a different diagnosis. And the truth was, we just didn't know what was going on. But there was a lot of symptoms. She wouldn't open her eyes. It was very hard for her to feed. Her muscle tone was very weak. And she was a very sick baby. So she stayed in the hospital it was the first 3 months. We didn't leave. where she needed assistance and she needed some surgeries, some basic surgeries to help her. And it was different stuff. She had, one thing we discovered was she was born with bilateral cataracts. So both her eyes, when you shine the light in them, you'd see they were white. She was blind. So we got her surgery, just like elderly people get. We had her lenses removed and she wore contact lenses. And that was one of a number of surgeries. And we were able, thank God, eventually we were able to bring her home. It was very specialized equipment. And she stayed home and she was good for, we were off and on at home, but we had weeks at home, maybe a month at home. And eventually she needed to go back to the hospital. And it got to the point where she was having a hard time breathing. So she was intubated. She was put on a ventilator. And she died soon after. It was probably a week after that final time she was put on a ventilator, she died. And it rocked my world. It was so shocking for that to happen. One of the comforts I found was saying that I will have other children and I will look forward to the future. So Jaime and I, we got pregnant again. And this is after Eliana died. It was probably 6 months. We got pregnant again. And given what happened, we were considered high risk. So we saw a special OBGYN, high risk one, and we had incessant checkups. There's scans all the time, which is nerve wracking, right? Because every time you go for a scan, they say, "Oh, what's that? Oh, that's okay." Oh, and our hearts beat each time. And towards the end of everything looked great. Towards the very end of the pregnancy, our OBGYN referred us to a neurologist. She said, you know, the brain has ventricles. There's like black space in there that babies have. And she said that for our second daughter, for Liat, they looked normal. They were in the normal range, but it was just inside normal. It was towards big. So she said, see a neurologist. And I remember seeing this neurologist. I liked him right away. There was something very candid about him. And he said, look, I'm going to be very frank with you. I think this baby has what your first baby had, what Eliana had. I think it's the same disease. And I said, well, we've seen 5 specialists. They all disagree with you. We've been seeing them the whole time. How do you explain that? And he said, in multiple ways. He said, 1, it's my judgment. It can differ from other people. And he said, 2, this is all I do is in utero brain imaging. He said, I've seen thousands of them. And he said, no disrespect to those other doctors. He said, all of them collectively have probably seen 100, if maybe hundreds at the most. He said, you can't compare. And he said, furthermore, I think this is a very soft call. I think it's very easy. It's obvious to me. And he said, I'll give you a statistical argument. Let's say what happened to your first daughter was 1 in a million. He said, what I'm seeing here is 1 in 100,000, and the two are related. So he said, multiply those numbers together and tell me if you think that's coincidence or if something's going on here. And that was devastating. And he turned out to be right. So Liat was born and she had the same disease as her sister. And we had no way of knowing at the time. We knew it was a genetic disease. We had no idea if this was just a random mutation, which happens to people, all of us, you and I, we all have random mutations, and they can equate to you get a freckle. It's fine. Yeah. Or they can be devastating. So we didn't know if it was a random mutation or if both of us were carrying some unidentified genetic disorder that all our family members have passed down to us and no one just knew about, no one picked up. Yeah. And it's unfortunate, but it happens. And when Liat was born, we realized, oh my God, it's not random. We had hoped that, but we're carriers. And Eliana died when she was 5 months old. Liat died when she was 6 weeks. So she did not, there were surgeries we did with Eliana that we did not do with Liat because we think that they caused her more pain than help. So Liat did not live as long. However, she got to come home and she died in her bedroom with us, swaddled with a heater on. It was much more comfortable. And that's kind of a gift we got from her sister. And it was a beautiful gift. So that kind of relief I was thinking about that soothed me with Eliana of, oh, I'll have another child. There was no escaping when 2 children die. I knew there was no fantasy. It was so present, and it was so difficult for me, and my body, I realized, in hindsight, that my wife, and I think women tend to be naturally better at this, she was very good at describing her feelings. Whereas myself, like with friends, I got this compliment many times. Friends told me, wow, Paul, Jamie looks sad. You look amazing. That's awesome. And they meant it as a compliment.
Yeah.
I knew what that meant. I knew it at the time. I knew it meant, oh, I'm not dealing with this. And my body turned to myself, and I got an autoimmune disease. I got ulcerative colitis, where my body thought my large intestines was an invader and started attacking it. And I got sick, and I got on some meds, and I put it under control. And then the meds stopped working, and I tried new meds and the host of drugs. Sylvia, I was on drugs that were so toxic, my wife couldn't touch the pills with her bare hands. They would seep in through her skin and attack her ovaries. I got infusions along with cancer patients in the hospital, and nothing really worked. And eventually I saw some specialists at Cleveland Clinic, amazing hospital. And they said, their advice was get surgery. They said, we would advise surgery, and we would have never put you on the last 5 drugs you were on. They said there are some people that can control this disease with drugs, and they'll have flare-ups, but it will work for their life. And there's other people right away we can tell that how severe it is. So I went through several surgeries, and eventually after the surgeries, I went from being so sick that I was going to the bathroom. I was defecating 18 times a day for up to 45 minutes. Like I couldn't do anything, bleeding internally. I went from that to going out and being able to exercise. And it was my vision. I wanted to run a marathon. So I did a half marathon once I was better. And then I did a marathon. And then after that, I did a half Ironman, which I was really proud of, and another half Ironman. And then eventually I did a full Ironman. So all these things started coming true. And the most beautiful thing is that my wife and I adopted a baby girl. It was the surgeries that I got. It was actually a year-long process to get the surgeries. It was 3 steps. So it was after the second surgery, I started feeling better. We adopted a beautiful baby girl when she was just born. And then years later, and that's the daughter that we were speaking about, that's my oldest at home now, Maya. And then years later, we adopted another beautiful baby girl when she was also just born. And Peri is her name. So Maya and Peri, they're with us now. And it was years of struggle. And I'll be very frank, the struggle never ends. It's still a struggle now. And the peace I found with that struggle is immense from where I was years ago. So that's my basic story. And I hope that that when people hear it, they focus on the full story, which is not just the tragedies we went through, but the complete story, which is all the beauty that came from it.
Absolutely. And you know what? I mean, this is the first time I actually hear your full story. The one I heard was the abbreviated version you gave to Growth U, and I wasn't in there live to hear it. And I heard from, other people. Well, this is very, very emotional. You'll get emotional. And I did. I got very, very emotional just watching it on video. So I can only imagine what people, and I see one person, and I've seen like 2 eyes pop in, hearing the story. I know in everyone's mind is how do you heal from such a loss? I mean, what did you learn from your 2 experiences of grief, like enormous grief and loss of losing children?
Healing, there was definitely, it took time. It took a lot of forgiveness. There were moments where I was not a great husband. And there were moments I wasn't a great friend. And most importantly, there were a lot of moments, the person I was most unkind to, where I'd say I was brutal with, was myself. And it's a big realization that, forget about the shoulds and all that, but just a very practical explanation. It doesn't help others when I'm brutal to myself. It harms others. In fact, what I realized is there's no way to disconnect that. If I speak rudely or if I act critically to myself, which let's be honest, as a parent to lose a child, I really don't believe we're built to handle that. I believe it's very unnatural. It's a skill that we have to acquire. But if in the face of that, when a parent does that, like myself, when I say that I'm guilty and I'm at fault, all that stuff will translate to everyone I speak to in my life. I'll be telling it to you also. It might not be directly, but it will seep through. When I say it to myself, it seeps through my actions, the way I behave, the way I speak to people. So healing, really, one of the very practical things I did is I kept searching. The athletics, I think, really helped. It was awesome to have events, and it was a goal. It was something to help me look forward to the future when it was very hard to do. The community that you mentioned, where we met each other, Growth U, was huge. To have a community of people where you can talk openly and find people where I can talk about what's going on, and the listener is really there with me listening and not thinking about, ooh, what should I say? What should I do? They're out of that kind of that ego world, and they're really just with me listening. That's been huge for me. So both of those things. I'm so fortunate with my wife that she's such an accepting, beautiful person, that we dealt with this in, like I was saying before, lots of different ways and different stages. She's a physician. She has tons of experience dealing with death. She knows, she can recognize the way people breathe when they're about to die. I mean, how many times do you have to be around death to pick that stuff up? I have no experience. This was brand new for me. And she was so patient, kind of waiting for me to go at my speed. So yeah, those things really help. So the athletics were helping, finding the community, finding people that you feel can listen to you. And there's a quote, I'm going to butcher, I don't even know who said it, but maybe one of the listeners can say what it is. Someone said this quote, that in death, you find people that you get much closer to, and there's other people you part from. And I definitely found that. There were some people that I really felt close to and loved, and they just did not want to talk about this. It wasn't malicious. They just weren't comfortable. And there's other people that really rose to the occasion. So knowing beforehand who should be my best support, and there's a difference between that and actually being open to it and finding those people afterwards was very valuable to me.
You're looking up the quote, aren't you? Or did you butcher it? You butchered it.
What's that?
I have somebody that's like texting me. It's one of my friends, the friend that I was telling you about that lost her son. And I had been posting the links everywhere, but I'm going to take this moment to like text her back and say, we're on live on my business Facebook page so she can find us, so she can ask questions. So if you want to continue talking about your healing, you're more than welcome to while I do this, because this was really meant for those listeners that have lost children, that have lost a parent, that are really truly stuck. I'm trying to see if I can find it here. I'm like,
yeah, go ahead and text her. And I'll just, before we started, I know one of the questions that you asked me that you had me thinking of, and I think is great, is what advice would you give someone who's in the same situation?
Yeah, if you could give us 3 pieces of advice, they would like so love that.
Definitely. And the way I answer that question is, and it's a good check for me, I say, man, if I had a conversation with myself. So my first daughter died. It's been almost 10 years. It's been almost 10 years / it just happened, right? So that feeling, there's something always fresh about it. But I ask myself, if I could go back and speak to myself, what would I say? And there's so much. And the story that you spoke about, Sylvia, the one that I referenced, was the last day that Eliana was alive. She was intubated. She was on the ventilator. And the physician came to us and said, look, there's a tube in her mouth and it's taped closed. He said, it's really not humane. It's not comfortable, the situation she's in right now. So we need you guys to make a decision. We want to do surgery and ventilate her and put her on the ventilator permanently, or what we want to do is take her off. And if you're asking me which one is going to allow her to live longer, I said, we don't know. We really don't know. There's a chance, the surgery is very risky. There's a chance she could, in her state, there's a real chance she could die from the surgery. There's a chance she'll survive the surgery and the ventilator will help her live longer. There's a chance we take her off the ventilator and she'll live maybe years. Or she might die right away. We did not know. And I remember that final day being in the room and being so pissed off.
Mm.
And, and I ask, like, was I pissed off at my daughter for being sick? Absolutely not.
No.
Never.
No.
There's never any anger. There was nothing but pure love that I felt for her. Was I pissed off at my wife? Never. I was not. I loved her. I was so angry at myself. I told myself, I said, Paul, I get choked up a little bit when I say this. But this is the exact thoughts I had. I said, Paul, you're the husband. Your job is to protect your wife, and she's crying. What are you doing? Your job is to protect your daughter. And if you're doing everything to protect her, why are you still alive if she's dying? And there's no logic in that whatsoever. If I had taken my life, it wouldn't help her at all. But those are the honest feelings. It was so much anger. So the advice, if I could go back, the first advice, and this is very, very important step for me that's been so valuable, is telling myself that what I'm feeling is very, very normal. It's normal and it's common. You are not alone. If you are going through the loss of a child or any tragedy, there was like a secrecy associated with it. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm feeling this. And I would have ruined the surprise and told myself, hey, Paul, guess what? You're not unique because of the sorrow that you feel. It's not unique. It's not me. And it's something that so many people feel. It is so relatable. And one of the beautiful gifts that have come from all this is me being able to speak about what I'm doing today. And I remember once I spoke in a house. It was part of a nonprofit that I worked for, World Bicycle Relief, which is a great little plug for that. It's a great nonprofit. And I was invited there was a fundraiser. She invited me to her house. It was a house with all women, and they were all friends. I was the lone male in a house with women. It was one of my shining moments. It was a lot of fun. And they had me speak about the nonprofit. And it was about helping girls in Africa, especially get to school by helping them overcome their transportation difficulties. And I related it to losing my daughters. And afterwards, there was an African woman there. I spoke about visiting the programs in Africa and how these girls have to escape both animal and human predators, and how the bicycle really helps. And an African woman came up to me afterwards and said, "Oh, I loved what you said." And I was talking, and I could tell she wasn't fully listening. She was kind of looking around the room, and she leaned forward to me like she was going to tell me a secret. So I leaned forward, and she said, "What you said happened to me. The same thing." It was beautiful. And I'll be honest, I don't know what she was referring to. I don't know if she had children that died. I don't know if she was raped. I don't know if she had to walk every day to go to school. But I could tell, and keep in mind, this is a house with all women and all friends. She knew everyone there. And despite that, she wanted to whisper what she said to me. And after she whispered it, she leaned back, and I could tell she wanted the conversation to be over. So I said, "Nice to meet you," and she walked away. And we never spoke again. Wow. I know that was the first step and the first time she ever spoke about whatever it was she was referring to. And it took immense courage for her to say it. And by sharing my story, it helped let her know that thing, you're not alone. And the truth is, every time I tell this to a group, every time someone comes out of the closet and says, "Oh, I had a miscarriage, or I had a child that died when they were a teenager or an adult," and it's so freeing. So I would reiterate that message to myself as the first piece of advice. You are not alone. Please don't feel critical or bad about what you're feeling. Lots of people feel it. The second piece of advice I would do is what I had said earlier: give myself some love. And it's very hard to do when you're taking care of a sick child, when your wife is upset. And the very practical explanation is that it is not possible for me to show up for anyone else in the state that I was. And I really, I speak to everyone about this, but especially mothers. I see mothers a lot there, and it's beautiful. They get so externally focused where they want to help others, and they look at these external rewards. Like, what makes a mother feel better than helping their child? And the child says, "Mommy, I love you. Thank you so much." It feels beautiful. And it's something very scary to hear that message. You need to take care of yourself first. It's the airplane. They always say, put the oxygen
put the mask on first.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't be there for your kiddos when you're falling apart.
You
and then you
can't.
model that to them. You model that energy to them, and they pick up on it. And it probably also poisons the relationships with others, around you, your marriage and, those, your parents, anybody that sees you, you emit that, and it's all over. So she's asking a question. Emma Lozano is my friend that I told you about. She's asking, how do you recover from losing your only 42-year-old son and firstborn from cancer that was never diagnosed correctly? And I guess that's a question for you, Paul, because I really don't know.
It's great. It's great. It's a great question. And one of the first things that I did is stopped wanting to recover and accept my condition. And I'll give you a story. And when did your friend's son die? How recently was that?
Emma, was it 3 months ago? I think it was 3 months ago in July, I believe, is when he passed away. So it's fairly recent.
So everybody's different. For me, my first one died 10 years ago, my first daughter, and it just happened. So it is a long scale, 3 months. It is happening right now. Mm-hmm. To me, when I hear that, it's not 3 months ago, it's present. It is occurring right now. And that, I met a man once. It was very interesting. It was fortunate. I was going on a bike ride and no one showed up for the bike ride. So I called the bike ride leader and I said, it's very important, if you say a time, know your calendar, know your times, and be on time. And I waited, and then I realized I had the wrong day. So I had to call back after this lecture and leave the message and say, never mind, you're doing great. But it was actually very fortunate because while I was waiting, I met a man who spoke to me about losing his son. His son had strep throat. And his son, he told the doctor, I think my son has strep throat. The doctor gave him a speech that he basically said, hey, I'm the doctor, I'll do the diagnosis. And he didn't run a test for, I think, 3 or 4 days. And he finally caved and said, all right, I'll test, even though you recommended it. And it was strep throat. And it was too late and he died from it. And the way the man told the story, I saw the pain. I saw how fresh the pain was. And I asked him, when did this happen? And he told me 35 years ago. So one of the things I realized, and it's a tough thing to work on, is instead of wanting the pain to go away, accepting it. Mm-hmm. And that's really where I am now. I'm 10 years young, post my first daughter dying, 8 years since my second one dying. It's not gone. It's the same answer I'd give to an amputee that says, when am I going to stop remembering that I had a right arm? Right? Dude, that's never going to go away, but you're going to learn to use your left arm. That's kind of the first thing. And there will get to be a spot where I don't think you'll ever stop seeing that as a tragedy, that the right arm is gone, but you're going to see all these beautiful things that came because of it. Mm-hmm. And that pain, that's what I would say to your friend, that and be pleased. Number one is be patient. It's been 3 months. Give herself a pass with anything she's feeling and anything she's going through. She's doing great. She's alive. She's breathing. She's doing great. One day at a time. Accept that pain, and not wanting it to go away. Just accepting it and loving it.
Wow. I mean, and like you said, it's always going to be there, but it's the acceptance piece. The acceptance. I thought that was genius because, and acceptance is where we also find forgiveness. When we forgive, we accept our present state, and then we can start moving forward. But the forgiveness piece, I think, is also there for you, right? That probably also had a big piece, because how can you move on when you haven't forgiven yourself? Let's say you're blaming yourself. And I don't know, Emma, you might be blaming yourself. I don't know, that they didn't catch it early, or how does that work? So forgiveness comes first and then acceptance, or the other way around?
I don't know. It's a really good question. I don't know, and I don't know if it's I don't know for myself, and I don't know for other people. Um, what I would say is that awareness, it took so long, and I'll tell you like a story that we spoke of recently. When my second daughter was in the hospital, Liat, and you know this well, Sylvia, because we discussed it, and you helped me come to acceptance with this. I bought an album, Swan Lake, Tchaikovsky Swan Lake, and it's classical music album, so it's 108 tracks, right? It was insane.
It's like
So
long.
we had that music on loop the whole time. Well, I listened to it, I don't know, maybe 6 years later, and I felt like vomiting. I mean,
Yeah.
seconds in, I felt nauseous. I ran to shut it off. The PTSD and the conditioning was so there. And I'm a big fan of what I call microdosing, where if something's hard for you, you do it in very small amounts, but consistently until it becomes easier and easier. And I started doing that with the song, and I got up to see if I could beat it. I got up to 1 minute and 24 seconds, and eventually I stopped. But it shows the power of music. And there was a video that we saw recently, I don't know if the viewers have seen it, where there's an elderly woman with Alzheimer's who's wheelchair bound, and her brain has very limited function compared to what it used to do. And she's a ballerina. She's Argentine, and she's a former ballerina with the New York Ballet in the 1960s. And someone put headphones on her and played music that she would dance to, and she started doing all of the routine. And they show the actual routine with this elderly woman moving, and she came alive, and her hands moved so gracefully. It was absolutely beautiful. And I loved the video. And it was only at the end that I realized that the music she was dancing to was Swan Lake.
Swan Lake, yeah.
And I had no problems listening to it, and I watched it again. So instead of, sometimes people say you have to change a story, what resonates more for me is to complete the story. And the deeper the pain, and I really believe this, that there is no pain like losing a child. I mean, a 42-year-old child, it's still your baby. There is no pain like that. The beauty that can come from it, the fact that I had that problem with that song, and that now I can complete the story, I can add on to it and share that as one small example of the potential. And even though it took me, 8 years to get there, of the potential, of the beauty that can come from things. And I've shared that story with other people. It gives them a little bit of hope. So now in hindsight, I didn't understand that at the time, but I have faith that everything that happened, there is a reason, even if I have no idea. And I see the beauty now that I bought that music, that it was hard for me to listen to all these years, that I could hear that I could see that woman dance to it. All those pieces that needed to come together so I could share this little story that maybe will plant a seed in others, for others in painful times to say, hey, maybe here's something I can attach to.
And I think it's really interesting because we were talking about it last night, as you know, and it's the refocusing of the mind. It's the power of the mind of associating Swan Lake not with the tragedy of your daughter's death, but rather with the renewal of a old woman's mind, like where she comes alive. And that's how you're now choosing to focus and associate Swan Lake with. And I think it's not an easy thing to do. It does take time, like he's talking about, Emma, and those that are listening tonight. But with practice, like you said, small doses, like what would you call them, micro doses of doing the hard things that stretch our ability and stretch our mind to refocus it, so that those thoughts don't dominate you. They don't take over your entire being, and you can't function and you can't see out of the pain. I think that was, honestly, the fact that you've come this far, that you are now able to write the full story of it, not just the painful part of it, I think is where the acceptance and forgiveness come full circle. But it does take time. It does take consistency and intentionality. And like you said, the way you healed, you picked up different hobbies to kind of channel your pain and your frustration and your anger into something a lot more beautiful than what you ended up with at the beginning, which was ulcerative colitis, which was very painful, I'm sure. But the Ironmans kind of directed that anger into something that you could, enjoy and it not like stay. I'm just asking, then just stay in your body and create all sorts of havoc. Because we need your genius. For those of you that are listening out there, we need your genius. You have a particular set of gifts that you were born with. And when you stay stuck in your pain and your loss for years and years and years, the human race, loses out on your genius because you're not able to operate at an optimal level. And that hurts us. It hurts all of us. So, I know that you gave two pieces of advice, that the feelings are normal and it's common, you're not alone, and then give yourself some love. Did you have a third piece of advice that you wanted to share?
I do. And this is the scariest one to me. It's the hardest one. And it is by far the most rewarding. And I always find, for me personally, I find those things coincide a lot. Things that are scariest tend to be the most rewarding. And what that's based on, someone gave me this advice. I've gone to a lot of bereavement therapy groups with my wife. And a person gave me some hope. She said, one day, and this will be a real mark that you've healed a lot, you'll be able to look at the photo of your dead son or your dead daughter, and you'll think of their lives and the happiness more than you will to the fact that they're dead. And that's very beautiful. And I can't echo that more. And, another way I would describe it, I spoke about microdosing. I had, I used to have deadly allergies to all kinds of nuts and peas, where I would go into a anaphylactic shock. And I've done microdosing with the allergens to get rid of the allergies, which is great. The drugs that I got that helped me breathe when I would eat a nut, and I could asphyxiate within minutes. And I almost did before going to sleep. It's very dangerous. The drugs I would get they saved my life. And what they gave me, they were relief. And that's exactly what I needed at the time. They didn't help the allergy go away at all. But at that minute, I needed to breathe. Right?
Oh, yeah.
They allowed me to survive. So they gave me relief, but they didn't help me grow. After I got that relief, I said, let me go start doing this microdosing. That helped get rid of the allergy. So this third piece of advice is really moving from relief. And relief is doing whatever you need to survive each day and moving more towards growth. And it is that, and it's asking that question. Instead of why did my child die? Why did they live? Why did my child live? It is such, and this is another blessing I got, when you have someone, when you see someone in the hospital that's sick, whether it's a child that's dying or an old person or someone that's elderly, you see how complex the human body is, how many systems. You start to appreciate when things go wrong. There'll be specialists. Each one will come in the room and say, this is beyond me. And when it ultimately comes down to, they say, look, what we could do is like build scaffolding on Earth. It might look big and important. It's so tiny, and one big tidal wave could wash it all away. It's not in our hands whether someone lives ultimately. There's stuff we can do. It's up to that individual. It's up to God. It's up to the universe. So what that does is it appreciates, you really appreciate the miracle of life. Holy, a person is formed inside of another person and comes out with a heart that's beating, and they can breathe oxygen and it goes into the blood. It's mind-boggling. It's amazing. So you appreciate the miracle of life and you ask, why did my child live? What was the purpose? And instead of going from that state of seeking relief, and I see bereaved parent, and especially when it's fresh, 3 months is now. And it depends on the individual. A year can be now. It can be years where you're still in that state where, hey, if this is a matter of you needing to breathe, you take the medication that allows you to breathe. You just get relief. Yeah. That's great. When you're ready, you can start working on living in tribute to your child. Yeah. Why did they live? If my child were here today, what would they want? And I have seen some parents, everyone's different, but some parents find soothing, and I think it's more in relief of seeing signs of their child. Maybe their child is still here sending them messages. I've never found it, but I know a lot of parents do. And I think that's fine. And I would ask, is that giving you relief, momentary relief, where you can get through the day, or is that helping you grow? And if your child was here, what would they want you to do? If you received a gift, which every parent has, I don't care if it's a miscarriage and I've read stories, this is serious, of parents losing their children in their late 60s, children in their late 60s,
Yeah.
an elderly mom. And by the way, it hurts all the same.
It's all the same.
It hurts
Yes.
all the same, despite the different lifespan. It's still painful. Don't think that mother for a minute said, oh, well, the child was in their 60s, late 60s. They lived a full life. That was painful. It wasn't meant to be.
Yeah.
Asking if your child's here, how that experience, not just their death, but everything they've done, how can you live in tribute? So that if you were to see them again, if they were here, they would smile and say, yes, that's great. And it's the scariest thing, but it's when someone's ready, it is the most beautiful.
Well, I have a comment here of someone that's, I think they're watching via YouTube on my YouTube channel. And it's, maybe they were able to give the gift of their life through that brief period of time, as the comment that's coming through. It's like, and Emma, I know you're still listening, you have a beautiful grandson that you are now the caregiver to. I mean, you are his parent. You have now are parenting your son's child, and he is your pride and joy. And you've always said that he left you the gift of your grandson, and you are now in charge of this little boy that is going to look up to you and is going to get all the love that your son got, in the same way that I know you know how to give love, Emma. And I'm tearing up just saying it, because I can't imagine as a mom to lose your child. I can't even wrap my head around it. I really don't know. I'm so happy I was able to bring Paul on board, so that those listening who have felt lost can start somewhere, start small, but start somewhere to move towards. And like you said, have grace for your journey. It's a painful journey, guys. Like, it's really, really painful, as you heard Paul say. And I heard you talk about your faith. So, and I know this is a question that Emma had, that I'm sure Dennis has as well. How did losing your child affect your faith? Did you have a period of time where you were angry at God, or did you ever blame him for what happened? I mean, can you share some light into that particular question?
I think in hindsight, and I'm probably hijacking the term, but I think in hindsight, I had a God complex, in the sense that I thought it was all up to me, all of this. Whether if my daughter dies, my fault. It was me. If my wife is unhappy, that's my fault. And one of the things that to have trust in, to have faith, and I've become such a person of faith. And I know there's a diverse audience here, so I know sometimes people are faith-based in both ends. Sometimes if I mention God, some people are tuned out no matter what. And if I talk about the universe, other people say that's too spiritual. But to each person, whatever they believe in, and I do believe in God, I became so much more faith-based. What a release to say, wait a minute, it's not up to me. I don't have that power if someone lives or not. That wasn't my fault. It wasn't my fault that someone died. And to have so much faith that there is meaning in everything that happened. And I really believe that, even if I can't find that out. And I know some people, I've had friends that aren't religious say, I reject that because I don't believe that there's a God. Well, explanations. One is just the butterfly effect. One is, if you look around and it's there and it's present, it's the same thing of doing that shift to, why did my child die, to, well, why did they live? What's the beauty I take from that? If you do that shift to look at that bright side, it's there. You can see that. So really, my faith you can see that there's an effect, that everything that happened has led to this moment. And I believe that if I went back and tampered with anything, it would be destructive. And I mean anything. This is healing, but I really believe this. If I could go back in time, I have such faith in the meaning of everything that happened and in the delicate balance that is the present right now, that everything that happened must have happened. If I could go back in history and change anything, I would not change a thing. I wouldn't change anything. There is too much beauty in my life and the people around me right now. And I know that can be very painful when you think about the worst times. But I fully believe that if I were to go back and change anyone's past, that it would only be worse than the just the perfect beauty that's out there now. And that's something that I don't say to everyone. And I think it really depends on where someone is, because the pain is so deep, it's hard to see that there could be any beauty. And I would say to someone that's in pain, I promise you that the deeper the pain you have gotten a gift where you can be the medicine for so many other people. If you are willing to share, and it doesn't take this ingenious insight, it just takes the vulnerability to openly speak about your feelings, you can make immense change and help others.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's an amazing piece of advice you're sharing, because I had, when we were growing up in South Texas, in Brownsville, there was a collapse of a building, and my friend got caught up in the rubble of it, right? And so did her sister, and her sister ended up dying. And the mom was very good friends with my mom, and she never spoke of her daughter again, ever. Like, it was as if she had never existed. And it affected everyone around her, and it affected her internally, because even though that was her way of dealing with pain, it destroyed like her family apart. They never got the therapy they needed. They never, the children have not, remarried or anything like that. They're afraid to have children, because of that fear of like losing a child, because they saw it with their sibling and they saw what their mother went through. And I think, like you said, when you can shift that, when you can say, this is my life and I wouldn't change a thing, I think it's so powerful for you to say that. I think it really does help people navigate from this major turning point in life to a more thriving life, instead of staying stuck in pain for so long. And I saw what that did to that family. It was devastating. I mean, it was like living that death over and over again. Nobody could mention the daughter. She won't talk about her daughter. Even, it's been 35 years now, 40 years since the accident, and she won't speak of her ever. And it's painful to watch. But I also know, since it did affect her relationships, tell me, how did this experience, did it strengthen your marriage with Jaime, or did it affect it for a time period, like after the death of yours? I mean, can you kind of help us out there with that question?
Yeah, and what comes to mind is that there's tons of books on bereaving, and we had a library full of them, and it's a very personal thing what books help and which ones don't. And I remember picking up one talking about you're a sunflower in a field and there's a bird, and I don't know what it was talking about, but I said, this is not me. I'm sorry, this is not
Like, no.
someone maybe it was good. But the one that was most valuable is called Grieving in the Garden. And all it was great. There was a list of questions, and they asked different sets of parents the questions. It was very practical stuff. And by the way, the answers, a lot of them, parents gave the exact opposite advice, which shows that it's very individual, and you should pick what works for you. There's no right answer here. And they asked things like, what do you say when someone asks, how many children do you have? And that was amazing to me because, well, I never pondered, what am I going to say? That's a very valuable thing to address. And one of the most moving stories was about a couple. They lost a son. He was 6 years old due to cancer. And they came back from the hospital. And when they came back, the woman, she remembers crying, leaning against the wall, crying, kind of collapsing on the floor. And she looked up, and her husband left. He left the house and went on a walk. And she was so devastated and said, how could this guy walk out on me when I'm collapsing? He just left. Yeah. And then later, the husband, this is for them, it was what brought them soothing. He wanted to have a birthday party at the gravesite for their son in memoriam. So they got a cake and they got the family together. and the wife wasn't helping with the preparations. And the family came out to do it, and all the family was in the driveway ready to go out, waiting in the car, and she was cleaning, and she wouldn't come in the car. And he told her, he said, get in the car now or you and I are over. And he waited a while more and she never came. And he went to the gravesite, and eventually she took a taxi and showed up. And the couple wound up splitting. And they asked them afterwards about each of those instances. They asked the man, why did you walk out when she was crying? And he said, I have no memory of that. He said, I don't know what I was doing. I don't know what happened that day. My son had just died. I was in autopilot. I didn't know she was crying. I didn't know what I was doing. And they asked the woman, why didn't you help with the birthday party? And why did you not want to attend? She said, it wasn't helpful to me. It didn't feel good. Like, I don't mind it felt good for him. It wasn't good for me. And it was so clear to me that this couple, two things. One, they didn't communicate. They didn't tell these things to each other. And two, it's like two people drowning, asking each other for them to save, to be their savior, to be their lifeguards. You cannot be a lifeguard if you're drowning yourself. You're not capable. And it's very challenging with a marriage because that's my lifeguard a lot. I help out my wife all the time. She helps out me all the time. And that works a lot because we're going through different things at different times. But when losing a child or going through any tragedy that marriage does, when it's that immense and it's simultaneously, it can be disastrous if you rely on each other as a principal savior. Yeah. So my wife and I mean, we had our low spots, and this is not hyperbole. Literally, we had a broken light bulb downstairs. We got into a screaming match. We were pissed off. I was pissed off. My wife was too. We were furious. Light bulb.
But I mean, that's just the stress, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's that exactly. Things were that fragile. I think maybe I'm selling myself short. I'm sure there's things I did. A huge part of this was my wife being so understanding to me mourning differently. When there was years where I didn't want to talk about it, she let it go. She never came up to me and said, you are making a mistake. She accepted that. When I got sick, she was by my side the entire time. There was never criticism. I mean, when I got sick during my surgery, I had my large intestines removed. I had a colostomy bag. So I had a bag on my stomach. I had a bag on my stomach where I defecated into. And I remember, and this is how amazing she is. There was one night we woke up, the bag came off, and there's poop all over us in the middle of the night. And what does my wife do? She gets up and she starts cleaning in the middle of the night and changes the sheets, helps me when we go back to bed. Not once did she ever look pissed. Not once did she ever criticize me. Not once did she ever come back with, you should. She was there supporting me fully. And awesome. It's beautiful. So we were very patient, and I don't have that anymore. Luckily, I can do things like a normal person after these surgeries, but it's very symbolic of some of the really rough times that we had where she was just understanding and patient.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's for any turning point, whether it's loss or not, when you have acceptance. And I keep hearing the word acceptance. It seems to be the common theme of what's helped you heal, is the acceptance of the loss, acceptance of your journey as a whole, acceptance of each other, of just letting it go and not picking silly fights that just really, they're silly, and just let them go, or accept your husband's like plight. Everybody grieves differently. I mean, as you were talking about that couple that she escaped into, like cleaning the house, it's patterns showing up in horrible times of stress, and those will pop in, and it's how we deal with our pain. We all have different ways of handling it, and it's even in normal stuff. We try to tell our husbands or spouses, like, hey, I do this so differently than you. Just accept me and believe that, and talk to me at my optimal state, not at my lowest state, because that also kind of brings us all down, right? It brings us down to that level. But I think it's amazing. Like, your story is, I'm inspired by it, very, very inspired by it. And I know a lot of people that were listening tonight were inspired. I don't know if any of you guys have additional questions you'd like to ask, because I mean, here's your absolutely your chance to do it with someone that knows about loss and grief. Emma, if you're still listening, or Dennis, or I don't know. I don't know if it's a Winston, I think maybe, that's out there on YouTube. If you have additional questions, because we have 5 more minutes before we'll sign off, if nobody has anything to say or ask. Any concluding comments you want to say while we wait, Paul?
I want to share one more gift that came from this that's beautiful, is the comfort that I have talking to people about any problem they have. It's great. And I know this. I remember this as a kid. My cousin, I call it, it's a family friend, but we're so close, I call it a cousin. I remember when he died, I was a kid, and his parents, who survived him, said, "We'd like to talk about him, so please ask about him." And it was very scary. I don't think most people did. And I remember, even young, probably a teenager, asking them about him, and I was scared each time. I said, "Oh, this is scary, but I'm going to ask." And I think the fear was, "Oh, am I going to make them upset? Are they going to start crying?" And I have completely changed now, and I see how much others appreciate it. If someone died, there could be a group conversation. Someone saying, "My son just died," and I'll say, "What did he die of? How are you doing?" And I see other people in the group cringe a little bit. "Uh-oh, he's going there. This is dangerous." And the person who's in pain, they look at me and I see what they see. They see presence. They say, "Oh, thank God. Here's someone who's comfortable talking about this." People want it. They want to see the comfort. Like, it's a beautiful gift. And I think anyone who's gone through an immense challenge, you can channel that. It's one of the beautiful gifts you get. You can be present with someone. Instead of worrying about what you say and how you feel and all this stuff about you, you can just be with them. And when they see the comfort, it's so soothing. So it's another gift I'll share from everything that's happened.
Oh, well, thank you. We do have a question and we have a comment. So from Winston, listening from YouTube, has music helped you through grieving?
Music is great. The leaves in Tokyo, the leaves are. I'm on a big walk challenge right now. I have a goal of walking 1 million steps in March. So I've been
Let's stretch. You're having stretch goals. Wow. Okay.
So I'm upping my steps. I'm doing a lot of walking, and the leaves are changing. They're falling, and there's this one section near the Imperial Palace where a lot of couples will go. And I was listening Legends of the Falls, which is one of my favorite movies with Brad Pitt.
Yes.
I was listening to the soundtrack. And as I'm walking, I'm seeing this young couple, a man and a woman, the woman in the beautiful white dress, and they're underneath these leaves, and the leaves are falling and they're twirling, and I'm listening to this music. So, I mean, it was a beautiful moment. My God, it was so pretty. And so music has helped me like that. There's been moments, specific moments, where it kind of amplifies what I'm doing. And that's been very helpful. And the music is very critical. Like, that's been great. So depending on what I'm doing, I need the right complement. I write sometimes. There's certain kinds of classical music that work well. And I'll listen to classic rock. I'll listen to hip hop. That stuff just does not jive when I'm trying to write. It's too intense, too distracting.
No. It's the classical, like, whimsical that you probably listen to. I can't pronounce this guy's name, but there's a composer I've been listening to as I write my book on turning points. And it's beautiful. It's very uplifting. I think it's on a Netflix series, Dance with Me Wallace or something like that, or and he's a composer that does a lot of the music from that, and The Crown and all that. So I'm like, yeah, I'm there with you. I got to do the whimsical when I'm writing. But in pain, I think it's almost always like, I don't know, like sad songs would be appropriate there to just kind of allow the emotion to surge up, because the last thing you want to do is keep your emotions inside, right? I mean, I know from the male perspective, it's a little tougher to show your emotion. You know, you mentioned that at the beginning of the interview. Do you allow, like, the music to soar, to kind of like release?
It can help, and that's the way I use it, as a compliment. So writing, for example, it can really help. It can help do that release, where it feels it's much more, I hit a state of flow with the music and the writing. It's coming out. It feels religious or holy almost, that there's such a state of flow, and it just it's much more, it becomes a feeling process with the music much more than a doing process.
Okay. Any other questions, guys? Because I'm typing in the chat. Thank you, Eric. I'm going to read you the comments in case you can't read them yourself. Paul, but from Emma Lozano, she says, thank you, Paul. Thank you, Sylvia, for having him speak. My pain is like no other. I feel my heart so broken. And then Eric, I can't pronounce his last name, Anyer, something like that. He's speaking truth right now. Paul was able to chat with me when I lost my brother. So, obviously you have people that you've spoken to, you've touched their lives. And I know that a lot of my followers will likely listen to the replay because sometimes listening to it live is just too much. They just can't fathom that, but maybe at another period of time, they'll re-listen to get some more advice. Because I know I've had a lot of friends during this time lose. My mother lost her little sister to something totally unrelated to COVID, but very suddenly. And it just took her completely off guard, and we couldn't bury her. We couldn't go and because they were in Mexico. So we couldn't, that closure wasn't there. You just she died and that was it. And we heard about it. And so I know that you've certainly helped so many people, and you'll continue to help people. And I mean, I'm open to collaborating with you in the future on future projects if you're open to it. I think you're an amazing guy. We have so much to learn from you still. And I'm grateful that you were able to heal enough for me to meet you, because I wouldn't have met you. And I know those are the positive things that occurred from your loss. The refocus of it. And I also know that your little girls, the ones you adopted, I don't know, would you have adopted them had you not lost children? See, I mean, so there's things that happen, that are part of a greater plan that we are not privy to at the time, but then we start to understand as life goes on, and we take steps out of our fear and out of our pain with faith and courage and resilience. So if there's no one else that's going to ask another question, I'd like to end the broadcast now. And thank you, everyone that listened. Eric, Emma, Winston, Dennis, and I don't know who the 6th and 7th person were, but I appreciate your time tonight, Paul. I know you're in Japan, so it's Thursday, morning?
Morning, yes.
Wednesday evening in Texas. So I thank everyone who has been on board. And if you weren't able to be with us live, you're so welcome to watch the replay. You'll get a lot of pearls on grief and loss. Thank you, Paul. I really, really appreciate you making time.
Thank you so much. It was great being here.
Okay, guys. Have a wonderful evening. Stay safe. Love you all.
Bye.